Good morning, everyone in the Central Time Zone. Good afternoon to the Eastern, and happy early morning to the Pacific Time Zone. We're very glad you joined us. We appreciate you spending your time and, more importantly, meeting some customers who I think can share some great insights and some just experience, right? So our goal today is to make this extremely interactive. Let's start by just introducing ourselves, and then we'll get into hopefully a very interactive session. Now, the way you do that is use the Q&A button on your screen and start with asking a question. If it's more detailed, we can actually turn on your mic and make it so that we can have an actual conversation. So we look forward to that. I'll kick it off. I'm Rob Newman. I'm one of the partners of Netformic. We're e-commerce and PIM experts in North America. We're proud to be one of the top 3 partners globally of PIMCore. And we just got back from the TUG meeting for the Infor ERPs, and this is the follow-up to that. So welcome. Ashley?
Yeah, hi everyone. So Ashley Lang here, VP North America for PIMCore. I look after North America. I still include those Canadians in my umbrella. We gotta keep it all together in North America. Been with PIMCore about 18 months. Before that, I was a systems integrator myself, implementing and rolling out PIMCore for customers through North America. So I have kind of some experiences from the other side of the table, but working with clients like Kenny and Ted. So really looking forward to talking to everyone today.
Yeah. Kenny.
Right. Sorry. Good morning. I didn't know if you wanted me to go next or not. My name is Kenny
You're
Roelofsen. I'm with the Abilene Machinery. We're an ag replacement parts company for John Deere Case IH replacement parts. We work with Perfion as a PIM and Microsoft VC as an ERP and Magento as a web platform. We integrate to all 3 and have a continuous integration between all platforms. So ERP to PIM to eCommerce. So I think that's probably the expertise I'd be able to give some advice to. Thanks for having me.
Ted, you're on mute, sir.
Thank you for pointing that out.
No worries.
I'm the VP of software development for Superior Communications, and we are the distributor for most of the cell phone accessories you would find in any Verizon or T-Mobile or any one of those stores. We have a Magento stack with PIMCore. We use Navision as our ERP. And we have our own separate manufacturing PIM that integrates with PIMCore. So that's kind of what I'm bringing to the table. We use Magento Enterprise Edition or Cloud Commerce, and all that's communicates with PIMCore via API. So that's what I've got going.
Fabulous. Okay. So with that, why don't we let's start with some answers, right? So we have a question, right, before the webinar began, so we might as well start there, right? Given your experience, would you start your project with data collection and dump it into a silo, or what do you think regarding data? How did you start collecting all the data that you're going to use in your PIM and DAM? Start with Kenny.
Well, we already had the data. We actually already had a PIM. We were using Stebo, I believe is the company name, or Step, the PIM we were using. So we kind of already had the data. The one thing we did have a problem with is all the data was not separated out into separate data fields. So what we did is we actually stopped production for a year, cleaned all of our data up, got everything into a correct data set, and then migrated it over to Perfion as soon as we did that. And then the process of getting Perfion workflow built out. Integration started after that. So my opinion is get the data there first, because how are you going to data model if you don't have the data? So the
Understood.
data should drive your workflow in terms of how your data is flowing.
Cool.
So that'd be my suggestion.
We already had a manufacturing PIM, so I got a little pressure to start on with that as our source for the web distribution or B2B model. But we quickly ran into the fact that the manufacturing PIM was not suited for easy modification or adding fields. B, it was highly customized for the manufacturing business, and C, I could hardly get anything changed. So what I basically did is we circled back around and we started with what we thought our websites would need. And then identified those major fields that we would have to have, map whatever we had back to PIM, our manufacturing PIM, and then we created a team to fill that gap. So we, on a daily basis, pull the information that we have from PIM. If it updates, like, things like dimensions and that kind of thing, weight, that gets pulled down. And then there's a separate team that looks at that data and adds whatever's needed to create a bigger, nicer, fuller picture in PIM core.
Fabulous. Okay, I'm really happy. We have another question from Paul. Question, and what I'd like to do is let's start with the official answer from Ashley, and then we'll maybe roll over to Ted. But does PIMcore offer a free version MDM solution, or is it a paid functionality? And then the second part is, right, I keep having issues with ingesting data into my data objects as they keep getting stuck even on a one row spreadsheet. I'll quickly add, that's what we do. We're happy to help you with ingestion. But Ashley, what's the answer to those questions?
Yeah, so PIM core has an open core. So the foundational pieces like master data management, product information management, digital asset management, CMS, DXP are included in the open core. So you can definitely get started with the open core version. But if you want to really start to manage that data with workflows, quality controls, all the governance aspects, right, you really need when you're collaborating with a larger team of people, then you're going to move up into the enterprise features where we start to kind of cover all those things. We do see a lot of companies start kind of in a proof of concept MVP mode, right, with the open core version. But quickly, as you add collaboration, as you want to add the quality controls, as you want to integrate, more systems, you start to bump into needing the commercial features of the enterprise edition, which is a paid offering. And you can get it, and host it in your own infrastructure or your own cloud environment, or we can host it for you with our PaaS solution. So you have options there. But yeah, we do see a lot of people start with OpenMDM to test it out and see how far they can take it.
Oh, okay. So Paul has asked, could you have a link sent over to Paul for his director to join? Although honestly, I think the general link works, Paul, for just attendees, and you could forward that if I'm correct. There you go. Well, they're already on it. And then and before we move on to the next question, Ted, anything to add around, ingesting data into PIMcore from your experience?
This sounds like the questions somebody just starting out that's trying to get some information in, and I totally get that. I think what bottom line is, you probably want to get the assistance of an integrator to help you with that. Not that it's not doable. It should be doable. I'm sure it's just a small little naming issue or something in the column, or maybe it's looking for CSV versus Excel.
Yep.
What we found is, we automated all of those jobs, with SQL Server or MySQL, and then you can have staging tables in between PIMcore and your ERP, and you can manage all that data like lights out eventually, where you don't have to worry about it. It just goes and does its thing, and the data is always updated as long as the database SQL Server agent or whatever you're using is running. But I'm guessing this is just probably a column or probably Excel versus CSV, or even sometimes I've seen PIMCore ask for a semicolon delimited file. And
It's true. Well, I'll just add, look, Paul, I'm sure my contact information is going to appear somewhere, and we're happy to, at no cost, we'll take a look and make sure that you're getting the chance to use the PIMCore open source version, and so you can try it out. Totally understood. We'll give you a hand, no charge. Okay. And therefore,
real quick, Rob.
Yeah, go ahead, Kenny.
Highly suggest a partner. As somebody who tried to do this alone, I can't stress a partner more than anything else. And I'm not trying to say that to sell you guys, but I know I would not be where we're at today if we did not get a partner. So
same here. Yeah, I agree with Kenny. But it's not required. And I think what you're doing, getting started with importing, is totally the way to go. Just get your feet wet. I think eventually, maybe to speed things up, to get the bulk of the data in, you might want to consult, because I just didn't have the nice thing about having an integrator is that you can expand your team quite a bit quickly and then bring it back down once those services, and you don't have to have people on staff to do it. I'm sure you're aware of all that, but yeah.
And no, I appreciate it, guys. And like I said, importing data into PIMCore is pretty easy for us. I'm sure we can walk you through a few steps and get you up and running. So regarding documentation, there is excellent documentation on PIMCore, right? And we can point you at that, or it is actually public. I believe there's documentation on the public GitHub, Ashley.
That's right.
A lot of documentation, and all kinds of developers, including our team, right, that have contributed to that, as well as their standard documentation. I think you can get into on the standard site.
Yeah, PIMCore.com resources.
Yeah, go ahead.
Documentation.
PIMCore.com, right. Did you attempt to do it? There you go. I think that one's covered. Bill, it's hard getting someone well, you don't need PIMCore support team. I'm right here for you. You're welcome. I'm not catching up. Okay, so Bill asks, what were some of the challenges you guys faced during your implementation, right? What was hard, other than getting data in when you're first starting out? But just share with us some challenges. And Kenny, maybe that means for you, right? Going back to your first.
We had quite a bit of challenges. It was a rocky road at first. A good example is if you're using Business Central, when they send data and we get it and we adjust it and send it back, if you don't nullify or clear out that field, you're going to lose all your data in that table. So a good example is like DIMS, product DIMS. I don't know if you guys deal with those, but we noticed if we'd update the weight and we had blanks and that weight update came through, but we had it in Perfion where we had the DIMS, it just blanked the whole DIM table out.
So remember
that you have to create two fields. I know I guess I'm getting into BC there, but Magento was the same way too. I guess any integration, you got to make sure the system you're integrating in operates the same way and how it moves data, and they always don't. So that's something like under the hood you're going to find out, because once you don't learn that till you integrate it, and then it happens. So that was a big challenge for us. And then once you do that, I think if you knew that going into it, you wouldn't be chasing down problems like we did. I mean, there was probably a month or two where we were just figuring out what wasn't operating correctly. So once again, I'm going to stress getting a partner is where that's going to help you, because they're going to know that before. So that expertise is worth every dollar. It's going to save you a lot of time. You can do the DIY approach, but I do think you're going to end up spending about the same amount of money as you would going with a partner. And what I mean by that is you're going to have to educate yourself, especially if you don't know anything about software.
Was
That
there
would be the
anything the
challenge.
first time out with Steve-O, right? So before you had a PIM, at the first outset of your PIM, right? Were there any any
Oh
specific
yeah.
challenges just in startup?
Well, Steve-O's a closed source system, so you are at their. I think they went to open, or maybe they are. I'm not sure. But at the time, they did not do integrations. They ran integrations themselves, so there was no versatility in their program. It was you get what you get. So that was the challenge there. We couldn't integrate Magento. We couldn't integrate any of the e-commerce platforms that we use. So that was the biggest challenge, and that's what the new PIM allowed us to do, was to integrate everything. It didn't matter what it was. That's the beauty of it.
Cool. So I'll reiterate, right? PIM core is a completely open core, and it is, in my opinion, just the most flexible to hook up. So Ted, what were some of the challenges you faced getting PIM core up and running? And specifically implementation, right?
We really didn't have, I hate to say this, but we didn't really have any. I think the biggest challenge for me was to roll it back one step and create documentation around what we really wanted.
Mm-hmm.
And that's really the worst part of it, is to make yourself sit down and define all these things that you want and how you want them to look. I even went to this extent of creating, Excel spreadsheets for every table that I thought I wanted, and how those would map to the things that need to go up to the e-commerce platform. That was the worst part for me. But I ended up with, like, I don't know, maybe a 90-page document when I was all done. And that saved my butt, pardon my French, lots of times, because we could go back and go, okay, what was this supposed to? Okay, yep, it does, or this it doesn't do, or that should do. And as an integrator from the other side of the fence, the guys that I talk to, like, it's really hard to know what the customer really needs. But if they can scroll through a document and go, oh, okay, I got it, there's the schema, that's super helpful. Hard to come up with, but it's really worth the effort long term. But once we did that, we didn't really have any issues that weren't my fault. So
no, they weren't your fault, Ted. It just fell on our shoulders.
There you go.
That's okay. And yes, Ted, you provide really, I mean, I have to say, as an integrator, right, that detailed documentation makes the work a lot easier. So I think one of the things maybe you look for with an integrator, right, is that they want to do specifications with you up front.
That's a good point, Rob. At this juncture in our relationship, which goes back to 2019, most of the time I generate the documentation, but now I trust these guys to actually generate the documentation for me if I don't have time. And I'll say, hey, I need this feature, and then they'll build it out and give me an estimate on it, which is that's super helpful. And then I just basically tweak it a little bit. So that you can actually have your integrator help you with that.
Well, and that up front is really, really important. So that gets through a lot of issues. Ashley, you want to provide any color to that?
I couldn't agree more. With Ted, Kenny, and yourself, Rob. Like, I've done dozens of implementations of PIM core, and I think knowing what the clear objectives are, the goals are of the project, having them prioritize. Like, sometimes you walk into a customer and there's a massive field of potential, because PIM core is such a flexible platform, right? There's a lot of possibilities, and it's really, okay, let's line those possibilities up. What are the first one or two we want to focus on now, and really focus on them, I think is really, really important, because again, it's such a flexible platform. It can do so much. So it's really about prioritizing. But I also think the data modeling that Ted, you touched on, you've got to, you know, it's really important what you're doing, structuring your product information, structuring your assets, and how you're going to use them downstream, and really understanding what you're trying to achieve. So getting help with that data modeling, depending on your internal skill set, is another place where I've seen SIs add a lot of value, because they've, like I have, you see it many times, you start to see patterns that make sense for an industry. So really tapping into an SI that knows your industry can be super powerful. The thing we didn't talk about, Rob, that I see actually is not so much a PIMCore problem, but an organization problem, is the onboarding of people to it, like that change management. Because a rolling out a PIM or an asset management system can touch a lot of people. So I think it's also bringing the people along for the journey, you know, so that it's successful. Because you can do a wonderful implementation, but if the people don't show up and use it, you know, you might as well not have it. So I think that's really important to think about.
That's a good, really good point. Yeah. And we had a lot of questions, and then some of the questions I had to ask Rob's team, like, what how does this work? I don't even know.
Yeah.
And so, but eventually, I think that's a great point, is trying to bring those people along as you go, to say, here's what we're doing. You think this is going to work long term? Obviously, I mean, you'll get resistance. Count on that, because people don't like to change. No. But as long as you know, kind of help them get thinking about it and acclimated to it, it seems to go a lot easier.
Yeah. Address the question, what's in it for me?
Right. Yes. Yep.
Yeah. And our, just to add to that, our original reason for adding the PIM was to get to an automated catalog production system. And so that's kind of how we gauge the entire project. Like, how do we get to that point? And the start of that was, oh, well, you need to separate all your data. That way we can move the data around. You need a data model in essence. That way you know where this data needs to go, why it needs to go there. And that's a road, that's a journey. If you haven't done that yet, that's going to be, I don't know how many SKUs you have, but if you have like as many as we have, that's a year and a half long journey to really get it right, because you're going to get it, in my opinion, 90% right. And then it's that 10% that takes a half a year to fix.
Yeah, but I think it's valuable to go ahead with that other, you know, 90% and get started on it.
Yep.
You'll always have these outliers, like Kenny says, that it will take a ton of time, but you can get a lot done fairly quickly up front. And then I'm always looking, I hate to use this term for low-hanging fruit. And you know, that does push that 10% back out. But again, you can get the advantages of it up front, and then solve those difficult problems later on as you are more familiar with the system and know how it works.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, I agree. We've got a really fast, easy question. I'm gonna give it to all of us. But first, it's gonna go Ted, Kenny, Ashley, me. Ted, how many SKUs do you support?
11,000.
Okay. All right. I'm going to ask Manish. I appreciate my other fellow folks on this call, but we're actually letting the panel answer and talk about it. Kenny, how many are you supporting?
I believe we have 58,000 in there right now.
Okay. Ashley, what's the biggest SKU implementation you did?
Biggest I'm aware of, Ingram Micro, tens of millions.
Oh,
so,
jeez.
You know, right. I think our typical customer is hundreds of thousands, but you know, there are some way up in the millions.
Okay, well, you beat me. Our largest is 1.2 million. We have a video of it.
That's up there.
That's up there.
You win. You win, buddy. Holy cow. All right. So, okay, I don't see any new questions from Bill, because Bill has been peppering us, but then I'll jump to, of course, I have some questions for you. Okay, hang on. It says another new question. Am I missing it? Oh, did you customize PIMCore with code? What are some of these? I'm going to answer really short to that. Everyone customizes PIMCore. period. That's one of the reasons you have PIMCore, right? You make it do exactly what you want. And like anything, right? 80% out of the box, 70% out of the box, and then there's always custom work. So what I will ask is, and I'll go Kenny, Ted, and maybe Ashley, but Kenny's, what's the most, and I had this question, what's the most interesting customization? I mean, what are you doing that's interesting and you think a little different with PIM? I have an answer. I know we built one, but that said, go ahead, Kenny.
Our catalog is probably the most complicated integration I've ever worked in my entire life.
Mm-hmm.
It's probably one of the most highly customized logs I've ever. And just to give you an idea, it's a legacy catalog that I inherited from the previous catalog manager. I don't even know where to start with that one, Rob. It is, we're doing a project right now with your team to automate that catalog. And we've went through, I think, 15 hours of discovery calls.
Oh, yeah.
So I'm a very big believer in talking it out first before we go to work.
Yeah.
And that's how complicated it's just taken that much time to work through every single nuance that we do to get our catalog to look the way it looks. It is completely 100% custom built. There's nothing about that is standard or normal.
No.
And I don't know if I'm answering your question. I could get into the nitty gritty. You know, how we relate products isn't how they're normally done. It just, the list goes on and on and on and on. So, but that's the most customizable thing that we do. Like I said, I don't think any of it's out of the box. I don't think a single thing of it.
Not your catalog. Ted, yeah. What's an interesting application you've got with PIMCore, or something, you know, a little different than perhaps standard?
So I'm going to be on the complete opposite end of that spectrum from Kenny. We almost have zero customizations in PIMCore itself, because PIMCore pretty much does everything that you can imagine that you would need with standard e-commerce outlay. Where we have seen incredible strides is on the other side of that, which is where we're using all the data from PIMCore. That's in the B2B e-commerce platform, which is where you make your coin. And so fortunately for me, I didn't have to deal with the things that Kenny has to deal with. It was out of the box pretty much right the way we needed it. We added some fields, but that wasn't in code. That was just using the product to create the different fields and forms that it needed within itself. So we've done tons and hundreds of thousands of lines of code changes on the e-commerce side. Almost nothing in PIMCore, because it doesn't really need it for the standard, for your normal e-commerce, like, setup.
That's a great point. Ashley, anything strike your mind as the most unique?
I think some of the most, I think some of the most interesting projects I've worked on are leaning a little bit in Ted, your direction, where you have pretty standard configuration of product information in PIMCore using all of the out-of-the-box features. But instead of configuring it to manage SKUs, configuring it to manage configurations for products and driving CPQ, and using the DXP capabilities from PIMCore to create quote builders. I think that's some of the most interesting things I've seen done with PIMCore. And so really it's, again, back in that B2B environment, right? Configuring some product based on a bunch of options, and then driving that through, a B2B sales experience. That's some of the most interesting stuff I've seen done with PIMCore. Tremendous amount of it was out of the box, right? It was really that CPQ part, that custom code on top of the DXP capabilities that are in PIMCore.
Well, I'll just add, actually, that is a great point. I think the most unique application of PIMCore we've ever built is we did an implementation for a printing company that had signage that had to go out to one of the largest big box home improvement stores. on an update basis. So it wasn't so much that PIMCore, but all the connections, all of the methodology of bringing in the signage and being able to update that on a rule basis that had to go out to specific stores, specific types. There was a lot of management of relationships, but it's probably one of the coolest things we've ever built. I'm being told we have 15 minutes. Holy cow. I don't know how that went that fast. So, good. I see some case studies going in. New question has been asked. Okay, Bill, how do you handle SKU management between PIMCore and your e-commerce?
Can I take that? Can I take that one?
Yeah, it makes total sense. Go ahead.
It's very important to separate your e-commerce platform from your PIM, because you don't want to lock yourself into a situation where you're making changes in one and not the other and having to sync them. And you also don't want, I don't want vendor lock-in with my e-commerce platform where I'm forced to use whatever PIM they have. That's usually pretty inflexible. It just wasn't, I mean, it has a PIM in it, but it's not the kind of thing you'd want to rely on. And so that's, those are separate entities in my mind, and and one supports the other, but they don't really overlap.
And I think to add to what Ted's saying, and it reminds me, a really common misconception is, PIM is about e-commerce. PIM is about commerce. It doesn't matter if you have,
That's right.
Salespeople in the field, a call center, inside sales, customer care, or if you have resellers, or you have direct, or you have e-commerce yourself. All of those folks, all of those channels need the same product information. And I really, Ted, what you're saying, that separation is so important, because, maybe you're a distributor and you're not doing direct, but all your resellers want it, right? They want the product information, but then all your B2B sales team need it because they're visiting those, resellers and trying to get them to take on the product. So think about it holistically, not just e-commerce, your product information.
Yep. Because you can then, once you have that separation, then you can send information directly to, say, Amazon. And, if you've put all that information in your e-commerce platform, it's not going to want to talk to another e-commerce platform to do what, somebody else wants to do. They're going to do it their way. And when you have it separated out, then you can send it to another platform and not have to worry about then sending it to another platform. It's all from that single core. And then it's like a hub and spoke in my mind. You have the hub is the PIM, and the spokes are all the receivers for that information. And if you try and manage it out in the e-commerce world, you'll have to synchronize all that, and that's a nightmare.
So I'll add a little bit to that. That's how we designed our system. Everything flows through our ERP first. That's where product gets set up for accounting purposes. That's where we started, and then flows to the PIM, and then flows out from there. So nothing gets to the outside world unless it goes through the PIM first. And what we did on SKU management is we do change part numbers, and we want them to be the same no matter where they're at. In our industry, part numbers are a big identifier to whether the part's good or what you need or not. So we actually have 6 different part number fields, and that's kind of where I was going with that, where it will blank things out if you don't. So if you want to change it, you change it in this field, blank that one out, send that other field back. Instead of, you can't have the same field doing it all together. And some systems can, but we found it doesn't work with BC and Magento that way. You have to set up a separate column, send that column as the updated number versus sending the original column. Once we did that, it flowed perfectly. Never had a problem. Before that, numbers wouldn't change, it'd be stuck. And I think that was just a syncing issue between Magento and the PIM at the time. But with the amount of data we were transferring, we had to go in intervals. So, and you'll come up to these things. These are challenges that are going to come up as you build it out. You're going to find, issues like, I don't know how big your catalog is, but if you got a couple 100,000 SKUs with pictures on everything, just really depends on what you're doing. But that's how.
Okay. I'm just going to jump out there because I know we've got 7 minutes. I suspect Ashley and I have time afterward if anyone wants to keep chatting, but it also may, for all I know, just suddenly turn off. I do want to thank. I see a lot of folks from Tug. Thank you for making the effort and for joining. And the questions have been just awesome. So I of course wrote, I don't know, I'm really glad. I think I wrote about 30 questions and I haven't had to ask one. So that's a good webinar, right? So with that, let me get to, I think, a couple of things, because I know some of the folks on the webinar are would be very new or don't have a PIM. What did it take, right? So you've decided you need a PIM. Some of you are experimenting with it, but what did it take you to kind of sell the idea to management, right? What is it that management pushed back on, or what were they looking for, or how did you talk to them and approach that? I'll start with you, Ted, because you have strict team management.
Well, it was open source, and I can have my sysad admin install it on a box and start using it without having to get funding yet.
True.
And then I can come back and say, well, here's a finished product, and then it's not hard to sell. So
that's a good point. Okay. Kenny, was there any pushback from your team?
Well, I am the management, so that helps. I'm an owner.
True.
No, I looked at it from an owner's perspective. What we were doing was not efficient. There was a lot of emails and Excel sheets, and I'm like, this isn't. I want my people to live in one system and come in and do their job and go home, and not have to have a training course of all the different programs you need to use. So that was what sold me. They could do their entire job in one location.
Well, that's an important thing, and it echoes what Ashley and everyone was saying, that use is really important. You can implement a piece of technology, but making sure that it's useful, right, and providing ROI is important. So I'll ask that question, right? Out of your system, what makes it pay for itself? What makes it valuable? And if you have any ROI numbers, I know folks aren't always good about calculating that, but what makes this valuable to you? And again, I'll start with Ted.
I think it's the lights out part of it at this point. I mean, there are some steps in the process that require human eyes, right? That there's a person that has to check the SKUs and make sure they have all their pictures. And PIMCore will tell you, I don't have a picture for this. You're not publishing it. So that's minimal. It's the fact that once it gets set up, it's all automated and runs without people constantly monitoring it. So my return was the fact that I could use a skeleton crew when it was all set up. There were lots of, the implementation wasn't, lights out for sure, but once you get it set up the way it needs to be set up, it can run itself, and you can focus on stuff like adding features to your B2B or your e-commerce site that are cool, that actually drive sales. That's the way we looked at it, and that's how I have no problem justifying it.
Great point. Kenny?
I'll give you two measurements. The first is productivity. I actually have a number here. So before we went to the PIM, we were producing around 3,340 products a year in terms of setups. Once we went to PIM, last year we had 8,850, I believe was our number. So that doesn't tell you the productivity increase. I'm not sure what will. And then just to add to that, AI, we haven't talked about AI at all. AI is something that we're going to start implementing into our PIM, and that's what gets me just really excited. The ability to bring another cutting edge technology into the PIM, what we're doing it for is SEO creation, content creation, and that's our next project. Rob doesn't know this yet, by the way.
No, but I'm pleased to hear it.
but they can do that. My point is they can do that. Like when we get a new technology, it's like, oh, well then let's implement it. And that's the conversation. Now we're going to have a meeting and we're going to talk about it. And so to me, that's the ROI, the flexibility to change. Like, because we all know we're going to have to keep evolving as we continue to grow. And if you don't have a software to do that, you're kind of a sitting duck.
Wow. That might be a great point to wrap up with. I'm going to just turn it to Ashley. Just kind of.
Data is everything. Data is everything. The better product data you have, the better organization is, you're ready for the next thing. Just like you're talking about, Kenny, AI next. If you don't have data to drive these experiences, if you don't have data to drive your commerce channels, then good luck, because it's all driven by data. What happens next?
100%.
Yeah. And I think one of the main features of PIM, just real quickly, is the ability, right, to take the descriptions and the information that sits in your ERP and actually make it valuable, make it so that it makes sense to different voices of your customer, makes it, as Kenny is talking about, right, it's an interesting frontier around how do we use that same information, that same technology, how are we driving SEO out of it, and as Ted said, how are we actually using this data to make the coin. And in the end, right, that's what a business needs. It needs to drive revenue. And I think that PIM, our experience for our customers is it drives revenue and decreases cost. I want to say thank you. Officially, I know we're over. I want to mention that PIMCore is holding PIMCore Summit May 15th in Miami. It's a nice place to meet. You're going to have some great speakers. The CEO of PIMCore will be there. Ashley will be there. And my business partner, Tom, will be there. And we'd love to host you. You can find out details on pimcore.com. Please give us feedback. One of the key things that we look for is feedback. Was this valuable to you? Did you, I know Bill and Paul had a lot of questions, but hopefully it answered yours as well. And feel free, right? Reach out to us if we can. We'll get you answers, from customers. We'll get you answers from folks we know and our own experience, right? So I like to say the consulting up front is free. The doing is not, but we're happy to give you the best of our experience, the best of our knowledge, and give you facts and data that we can share. Anything else, Ashley?
It's awesome. Thank you, everyone, for coming. Everything Rob said. Amen.
All right, there we go. So what are we going to do? Hang on. We got public. I'm just trying to watch the, okay. Burnt. Very good. So look at all that great content in your public chat. There is the PIMCore Summit is there. By just typing a Q&A, does anyone want to keep going? I'm not going to hold are very generous with their time. Thank you, Kenny. Thank you, Ted. I won't hold you guys, but if anyone wants a little more information, Ashley and I are paid to sit here. So
not a problem at all. Yeah. I want to re-say this. I'm not trying to sell you guys. You guys have been a tremendous help for my team. And if you guys are going to choose a partner, this is a good one to choose. So that's my last bit. Thank you.
I totally agree with that. I mean, it will be a relationship that some of the things that were important to me is that the fact that sometimes, and I know in the IT industry, sometimes you don't get to choose when you're working. If there's a problem on a Saturday, I can ring up CoreShop and somebody will pick up the phone or Skype or Teams and help me. And having that because I don't know everything, and the system's complicated. And I'll get the help. That's a very
Ted's
important.
not saying the real thing. These owners give you their number too. You call the owner.
No, you
Yeah.
have our cell numbers. That's true. I just wanted to say, Ted has been with our company long enough that he's actually now gone through 2 name changes, and he still refers to us by the first one. Core Shop,
I'm sorry.
CSS Commerce. CSS Commerce is now Netformic.
Yep, sorry about that, Rob. I didn't even think about it.
That.
Yeah, it's the same company.
Same company.
Yes, but with better people. Our new expanded is what we'll call it.
Yeah. No. Same owners. Sadly for you, Ted, but great people that work.
Yes, and I'm working with the same people that I started with. So
that's true. You are.
That nobody quit when the name changed.
No, thank you. So, yeah, that's good.
They got a great team. Great team.
Right.
I can't say anything better about them. So.
All right. So, I see we've got Paul, Dan, Bill, Steve, Andreas. You're still here. If you guys have questions, maybe we could turn on with that few people and Oliver, can we just turn it on so we can all talk, or does that not work on this?
I'm going to take off, guys. I got to get to the next one.
Penny,
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Have a great day.
Thank you, Kenny. Cheers.